Hats, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, start with interboard liaisons. Bridget is here. Would you like to say anything?
No, actually, I think Paul's going to address regarding presenting the budgets to the town council.
Okay, good, thanks. Thanks for being here. Anybody? See our kids? Nope, nobody else. Okay, Labor Union rep? No. Update from principals and Director of Curriculum Instruction. Mary, you want to start? Sure.
So it's hard to believe, but as soon as we get back from April vacation, we're already really in high gear planning for next year. So to that end, we already have for the AP courses that we're looking to add to our high school. Our teachers are gearing up for summer trainings. All of that takes place typically in July, so we need to get those dates secured now and get our teachers registered. So that's underway. A week from today, we have our grades 6 through 8 literacy rollout for 2019-2020 schedule. We're really walking through the units of study as scheduled for our new model in middle school literacy. As you know, we're transitioning from a double literacy block to a single literacy block with a teacher who focuses on both reading and writing. We're adding a literacy specialist to the middle school, so we're really excited to really get that relationship started and work with the teachers so they can plan now for implementation in September. And just that really grows on many of the practices we've introduced over the course of last year and this year. We also have an accreditation process that we haven't talked about a ton here going on for our preschools. So Mr. Gonzalez and I met today with a consultant as we go through the process. It's a very thorough process to reach NIAC accreditation, a requirement of our Smart Start grant. And we're going through and making sure that we have every component of that process complete and prepared so we can submit our candidacy materials this summer, and we anticipate a fall visit to our 3 preschool classrooms at Memorial School. So you've heard a lot about sort of the NIASC process at the high school. This is the equivalent for our preschools. So we've been working on that really over the course of 2 years. So we're excited to see that to fruition and highlight all of the work of our preschool team. Additionally, a major goal for us as a school district is to organize and be able to communicate out a K-12 articulated curriculum in every content area. And to that end, we have been focused on a digital environment to house that process. As I've met with the curriculum subcommittee, you know we've been working on training and development of the curriculum, and we're also looking at how we're going to house and communicate that amongst the teachers. So Rich Fielding, Director of IT, and I have been working on that. My assistant, Shelley Spula, is going to be playing a major role as we coordinate, collect, and then communicate out all of that curriculum. So we're excited to really be able to have that final product over the course of the next school year. And then finally, we're in final preparations for our spring state assessments, our Smarter Balanced assessments in grades 3 through 8. We'll kick off in May. So already today, Center School, for example, started some boot camp exercises with students, and so we're in the final stages of making sure everything is ready for our student population. That's a major undertaking at Memorial Center and Middle, so it's been a lot of planning, and we're excited for our students to have the opportunity to show what they know.
Good, thank you. We want to start top down? Yeah.
All right, start in the middle.
All right, start in the middle. We'll go middle.
So we are really excited. Just one thing to share with you. Last Friday, April 12th, we had our Acceptance and Tolerance Day. It was an entire day dedicated to social and emotional development of our students. Started the day with an activity in their homerooms with an advisory component to it. Mrs. Amaral was instrumental in getting this off and running, as well as our support staff. We had Kevin Booker in. He's part of the Anti-Defamation League. He came in and gave a fabulous presentation. We also had a student in our 8th grade working as part of his capstone project. He did an entire, almost hour-long segment on stopping the hate and doing a lot of whole school activities with that, which be very nerve-wracking for the administration in the building to have a 13-year-old running the assembly, but I want to say it was done incredibly well, and the students were very appreciative, I think, of the entire day's event. So the feedback I've gotten from students already was just incredibly positive, so we're hoping to continue to ride that nice positive climate change.
Good job.
So at the high school, we have 2 upcoming inductions this week, one for the Triumph Honor Society and the other is for National Honor Society on Wednesday and Thursday respectively. We have the Laps for Sarah event taking place this Sunday to support Sarah Barney, provided the weather that morning is not like the weather that we have now. There is a rain date for that scheduled in May, should it be needed. Starting next week, there's a new traffic flow pattern that's going to be starting here at the high school for students who are picked up or dropped off at the high school. This is now going to take place in the back of the building. In fact, this week, some may have noticed that the former exit-only part of the parking lot is now a 2-way. So I will call it a quote-unquote soft open. There's going to be a communication blitz that happens this week so that parents are fully informed and they will get that started. And finally, happy to report that the gym walls are now adorned with the remaining banners for athletics, and that is able to be seen by all. We're planning a sort of what I'll call an unveiling or a re-unveiling for some with an event in the fall. More details to come when that's all worked out. I don't want to let that go. There's a handful of folks I'd really like to recognize. It's a far longer list than this, but it was a much more sophisticated endeavor than at face value. So we'll begin with our athletic director, Sean Russell, our director of facilities, Don Harwood, our superintendent of schools, Richard Smith, the members of the board of ed for having their confidence in me in making that project happen. And I'd also like to especially thank the advisors of the class of 2018, Jackie Russell and Regina Del Bobe. I say that because in their communication with the class officers of the class of 2018, they funded the project with the remaining money there to make that happen. So, so exciting stuff.
All right, it was a nice first day back from spring break at Memorial. Kids came back in excited, close to the end of the year in their mind, but we got a lot of work to do. We were welcomed today at the end of the day with 2 high school students who did an Earth Day presentation. Corlin McDaniel and Megan Bossy came down and presented to our 3rd graders, so it was nice to continue to have that connection with our role models up at the high school. Our students really look forward to learning from them. We have our kindergarten screenings next week, and most importantly, for any families that are listening, spring pictures tomorrow.
And if I can add on to that, right before vacation, our PTO hosted its annual pasta dinner, which was cooked by staff and served by staff, and raffle baskets, and our school art show in the lobby. Incredibly fun evening. Another thing that happened with technology in use was a couple of our 2nd grade classrooms Skyped a live chat session with Jane Goodall and learned about some of her work in conservation. And there's a picture of a 2nd grader who did a biography project on Jane Goodall, and she actually got to speak with her in that Skype session, which is just, that's exciting element of just one piece of learning that's happening.
I was pleased to present All Things STEM at the Rotary Club the Wednesday before vacation. They were very interested to hear what the school system had to offer and very pleased with the direction that we're going with that, and are always very supportive to center school, especially with the Invention Convention. Speaking of the Invention Convention, May 4th at UConn are the regional finals. We are sending 6 participants. Tomorrow is the matinee of Willy Wonka. Very excited for that. Been a lot of hard work. I was able to see a sneak preview this evening, and it's going to be an amazing show. This Thursday, we have the salmon release. Mr. Moore took that on himself this year. All the students have been tracking the water temperature and the salmon eggs, so they will be released on Thursday. Evening performances Thursday and Friday for Willy Wonka. On Wednesday at noon, our 5th grade chorus will attend the Salt Marsh Opera, a performance at Middletown High School of the Magic Flute. And the end of next week, our 5th grade will go to a planetarium that aligns with our NGSS Shooting Stars unit.
Good, thank you. Anybody have any questions or anything? All right. You guys have been busy. Audience of citizens? Does anybody have anything they'd like to talk about? Yes?
Yes, this would be 26 Hills Avenue. I live on the corner. Couple items. Number one, are they gonna do anything with that hill? There's nothing but a mud hole right now.
We can look into it.
I
Superintendent
mean, I lived with the dust coming off that thing for 2.5 years. And my expectation was that it would be returned to the state it was in beforehand. The erosion control fabric
on the right side.
that somebody had paid to remove, they just buried it, and it is now exposed. If you look at the hill, it's a mess. It's an embarrassment. And I'm just sort of curious if there's going to be anything done to fix that.
You'll recall that I think the last time Mr. Libby was here, it hadn't been mowed because the rocks were destroying the town lawnmowers. So, to my understanding, they did remove part of the rocks. However, it's never been sufficiently seeded for lawn.
So it looks like any topsoil on the grass would.
I am not sure that the building committee is planning to include that.
Well, who takes care of grounds in general?
Well, the park department mows, but they wouldn't be responsible for topsoil and seeding. So right now we don't
Look
have.
into it.
Yeah.
Don't have an answer for you, but
So who's got the ball?
Until the project is turned over by the building committee, it's still the building committee's project. I will be glad to contact them to see if they're planning to do anything with that hill. Until they turn it over, the Board of Ed should not do anything because then the Board of Ed owns it
Yeah.
completely, as you well know.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm still removing silt from that project. Item 2, the front steps that are out here are falling apart. Literally falling apart. If you go in there, you'll see where the concrete is breaking down. I don't know if it is caused by salt, because we had such a mild winter. I don't think that's the cause. I think you just had cheap concrete put in.
Last year, one of the steps, you'll recall, had to be completely replaced. In fact, there was a yellow caution tape keeping people from one side of the stairs last year. So that has been an ongoing problem.
all right, hold on. Building committee again. All right, we'll take the matters to the building committee.
The rest I just deal with Don on email.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Nope, okay. Consent agenda, on that is the April 8th minutes. That's the only thing.
Make a motion to consent agenda.
Okay, any second?
I just have a second.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, Lois second. Nancy,
Yeah,
I know you had
we just-
something.
I just wanted to point out, I was talking to Rosemary about just in section 8.1 specifically, superintendent's report, where we talked about the different proposals, or whatever we were calling. Remember, it was a little confusing. Which was number 1, which was number 2, all that.
Right.
So I think that we all know what we thought about the options, but just that the wording in these minutes just has to reflect exactly what each proposal was.
We can clean that up.
Supported, that's all, just threw that out there.
Okay. So can we have an amended motion to approve the minutes with changes to that section?
So moved.
Okay. Second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Okay. Very good. No student staff recognition tonight, right?
None.
Okay. Committee reports, Hannah is here.
So we have had the start of some spring sports, so baseball, their record varsity is 1 win so far. We've got games throughout this week, April 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, and 27th, so hopefully we'll get some fans out there. Softball has a record of 2 wins. They also have games on the 23rd, 24th, and 26th. Outdoor track has had the Bellringer Invitational, which was organized and helped run by senior Jonathan Barber for the senior project. They had a meet at Coventry, and they had the Stafford Invitational. Boys and girls tennis is also ongoing. Boys tennis has had 3 wins, girls has had 2 wins, and they both have games on the 23rd and 26th this week. And golf has also started this week. So they played at the Blackbird Country Club. East Hampton had a score of 212, which is awesome. They have meets on the 23rd and 25th. So some school activities. Kristen's not here. I've been here for a while. So the middle school and high school joined together to perform high school musical at the beginning of April. The students and teachers are getting acclimated to the new Parent Square app that's replacing Remind. Students have just returned from the Mexico trip on Wednesday. It was awesome, by the way. Everyone has enjoyed their spring break and probably a little sad to be back, but that much closer to the end of the year. NES and triad induction is also this week, and students are beginning to prepare for the upcoming AP exams in May.
You went on the Mexico trip, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it was good?
Yeah, very hot.
Very hot, yeah.
Yeah. Not
As
like
hot as
sweater now.
China, hot as China?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was,
Not very.
oh well, glad it went well. Okay, Personnel Committee has not met. Policy and Curriculum,
Yes, we have 3 policies that, I believe all were waiving the second read on.
We will ask the board to
All 3?
waive the second read on
Okay.
them tomorrow.
Yeah, so we have, the first one is the graduation requirements, which we had a presentation by Mr. Rizzuto. So that reflects that presentation, and is there anything legislative in that, or?
We're
Yeah,
actually
it
scheduled
does.
to discuss them later in the agenda.
Oh, okay. There's that one, there's class rank. There's another one.
and one more, right?
Just calculating that, and the attendance
Attendance, okay.
policy. Yes.
All right, so we'll look at those later. Okay, thank you. Finance, Transportation, Building and Grounds.
We have a meeting scheduled for 7:30 a.m. on May 2.
Okay.
If you can't make that, just let Rosemary know.
Good.
Excellent.
Okay.
2 of 4 are saying yes, so it's going to happen.
All right, and no Transportation, Buildings and Grounds has not met. Liaison reports, we're just starting our search for replacement for Dr. Howley, so that's all gonna get rolling. Friday when I pick up applications and interviews and things over the next couple weeks. So looking forward to that. Building committee, anybody?
I did not see an agenda for this month.
Okay, so, but we'll be contacting them. Okay, communications, superintendent's report.
Yeah, just a couple of very quick things because we have a couple of presentations for you tonight. In your packets, there is an update that was sent to all families. It listed what's included in the budget at 2%. It also described what's included in the capital budget under technology. We reviewed this at your last meeting. I'm not sure if you have any questions. It was also in this week's update for people, and it's also been, the PDF is available on the Facebook page, district Facebook page, as well, if you have any questions. The other thing I wanted to share, since we're adding 3 AP courses, potentially should the budget pass, with AP Music Theory, AP Physics, and AP Computer Science, is the Connecticut State University system, including Western, Central, Eastern, and Southern, and all of the community colleges have now unified their acceptance of any score on an AP exam that's a 3, 4, or 5 granting academic credits for. So if a student was to take 3 or 4 AP courses and attend any of the community colleges or Central, Eastern, Southern, and I left one out, Western, thank you, they would accumulate almost a semester's worth of credits. The community colleges and those 4 schools have all had totally different policies, but now they've unified that policy, which I think only calls to us to increase the AP offerings and not look at AP offerings as only for those students going to the most competitive colleges. Because they will accept the credit for a 3, 4, or 5 at the community college and at our state universities. Just to remind you, here are the offerings that we have at East Hampton High School already that I know you're familiar with. The UConn courses are credit-bearing at UConn and other universities, so it's nice to have a balance of UConn courses and AP courses. And you'll recall that these are the 3 pending budget approval that we are looking to add. So with the, I think it's 9 AP courses that we currently offer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you'd be up to 10 AP courses and 3 UConn courses.
Great.
Did I have wrong?
12.
Did I not say 12? Oh, yes. So you had 9 plus the 3 courses, you'd be up to 12 AP courses. Thank you. I'll have to review AP calculus.
What is UConn Lifespan Development?
It's an early childhood class. So through our family and consumer science, it's for those students that are interested in early childhood education.
Wow.
And that gives you credit at UConn. The writing is mainly
Has that
for.
we always had that? How new is that?
This is year 2.
Oh,
With the new teacher.
just want to make sure I didn't miss out on anything.
Yeah.
No, they didn't have it back then.
And so the 3 that we're adding for a total of 12 AP courses, thank you, are the AP Physics, AP Computer Science, AP Music Theory. But again, this is pending budget approval. Because it does require new materials for each of those courses and the training of the teacher. And just to give you some statistics on the value of these AP courses, the class of 2018, 37.6% of the class of 2018 took at least 1 AP exam while in high school. We'd love to bump that number well into the 40s or 50%, considering now that those students going to community college, that AP carries in, those are dollars right now, carrying into college credits in your pocket when you go to these.
Yeah.
And then of that 37, not of that 37%, but in 32% of the class of 2018 scored a 3 or higher. So while 37% of the class took at least 1 AP exam, a pretty good percentage of that, 32% of the class of 2018, scored that 3 or higher, which would be college credit in their back pocket at the various colleges that we've described.
Good.
And I don't let me confuse you. It's not 32% of the 37%, which I started to say. It's 32% of the class of 2018. I saw Mark pull out his calculator, so I want to make sure that he wasn't looking at 32% of 37%.
Just put it down, I think.
Okay, I'm glad I explained that.
Well, we usually get the AP reports every year.
Yeah, we've been over
So
it.
we know our kids do well.
Right, but I think, now with the focus of that community college and, for students that say, well, I'm only going to this place, or I'm going to do 2 years here, it's a significant,
Yeah, sure.
it's a significant savings for those students who are forced to work and invest in community college, that you could carry a semester worth of credits in, if you're willing to do the work in AP courses and score at least a 3 on the exam.
So how, seeing as this is all new information now and
Yep.
kids are already scheduling, how is?
We just got this
going
information
to-
today.
Where's Caitlin?
This is
How is that
hot
gonna-
off the press information.
dealing with guidance officer people, you think we're gonna have to sit down and talk to the kids and,
they're even gonna start it with this year's class, the college has agreed to start it with the class of 2019.
Well, that's
So, I mean,
great.
Yeah,
yeah, so kids that are signing up for classes.
kids that took the classes now.
Yeah, but I'm
Are
saying
even-
how it's going to affect our guidance department with kids now, maybe
Sure.
switching from, oh, I could take AP now, but I was going to take this.
I think just receiving it, we have to look at that process.
And
And
see
I
how
also
it's-
think like that, you know, since we've only really kind of gotten to the point where we're looking at what our numbers are across the board for all of our classes, and we're still formulating how many sections we'll have of all of our classes and all those, we typically end up going back to our kids and having conversations anyway, so I think
So
informing them of this.
This may change
Yeah.
a lot of kids' schedules, yeah.
But I think that we, in general, try to strongly encourage juniors, next year's juniors and seniors every year in our individual meetings. And I know that right now Pam and Melissa are still at the tail end of their sophomore meetings, and they're having, those are new this year, they're having like full period meetings like they do with their juniors and seniors. And so that is definitely something that they have been continuing to have kids look to take on an additional challenge each year, whether it's from level 2 to 1 or 1 to AP, and then having those conversations with them individually. So.
And, you know, I want to stress, because at certain colleges, they'll count AP advanced placement for advanced placement, so you may not get credit for it. You may just have to, you may be able to skip freshman English and then jump right into other courses.
level, yeah.
However, this agreement is for academic credits at all of these schools. So not only would it be for advanced placement, you would carry in the credit for those courses with you.
And I think when you think, Joanne, about what does that mean, you know, as the counseling office naturally has those conversations, but I think from the board's perspective, where it could be something that we need to revisit over time, is as demand increases, as students and families become aware of these opportunities, how they can access these credits early, and we have increased demand for AP, how we can staff
Exactly,
those
yeah,
classes.
yeah,
Do we have the
exactly.
capacity?
Yeah.
It's going to be the question, I think, from the board.
Could we get an update in June, just to see how many kids have, like what happened over the next couple months with kids changing schedules, and just an update on, you know,
Well, we'll give you the enrollment figures.
yeah, in the classes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just curious to see how much this is gonna affect the classes that we
I
offer.
don't know that we'll really have a before and after, because it's not like they're registered now, we're gonna tell them, and then they're gonna change. But
We'll
we
just
can
give you the
definitely
stats
let
of
you
what it was.
know
Okay.
who's enrolled for AP.
Okay, sounds good. Anything else, Paul, or?
No, I'm just perplexed at the screen here.
Okay. We have an enrollment report for April 1st. Anybody have any questions on that for any of the schools, or? I think it's anything too noticeable. Okay. Our program presentation. The first one is assessment of, for, and as learning, a close look at reading achievement K through 5. Is that Mary?
Yes.
Okay. Mary is up. Oops, I'm sorry. Okay.
So I'm going to invite Jess Warner, Joey Bauer, and Mindy Wilkie to join me for this presentation. They are a K-5 literacy team. So Joey Bauer and Jess Warner currently support Memorial School, and Mindy is located at Center School. So this presentation originated with a request. Joanne had reached out in looking for information about, you know, what is the reading achievement of our students? How do we monitor that? How do we know, say, where our third graders are in terms of reading? So this seemed like a natural time to look at that. On the 8th, when we were here together last, today's the 22nd, we looked at our accountability index, and we discussed those figures and how East Hampton fared in that state report that was recently released from the State Department of Education. And as I indicated to you that day, that looks at a number of indicators of student performance and the overall health and wellness of a school and ultimately a school district. But and for achievement and academic data, it really looks at the summative Smarter Balanced assessment that's given every spring. I mentioned it earlier in my update. And even the State Department of Education would tell you that is a broad snapshot of a student's performance in time. And it actually isn't designed to really drive a teacher's choices in the classroom day in and day out in order to grow a student's performance. In fact, it's really an assessment system, Smarter Balance. That was one of the key changes in state-based assessment when Smarter Balance was ushered in 8 years ago. That we no longer just look at one time a year how you perform. Students will be the first to tell you that's not particularly authentic in terms of how they're performing, how they're growing, how they're changing as learners. And so Smarter Balanced, in fact, as an assessment system includes interim assessments or periodic assessments that we can use to measure student performance. But we actually know from research around student learning, and best practice in the field would indicate that we should use really multiple measures that we monitor to make decisions about student performance, to make direct daily decisions about next steps for instruction. So how do we get an understanding of how a student is performing and then make choices to continue to grow their skills? So when we look at something like our reading department and how they coach our teachers in reading instruction and how they work to monitor student academic performance and then assign services based on that, it's actually a pretty complex task. It looks at a lot of different types of assessments. It looks at working with individual classroom teachers on a day in and day out basis in order to monitor our student performance. So it's a natural outreach or growth point from our conversation about the accountability index. We know the state's going to measure us in that way. We prepare our learners in a variety of ways by teaching to the standards, by giving them the interims, making sure they're comfortable on the assessment platform. But really the way that we prepare them is to know them well as learners and then to plan instruction for them that's going to be the appropriate next step that they need to continue to grow and achieve. So we look at that broad measure that the state gives us every year, but I wanted you to get a sense of what other data points do we use to monitor student progress, and how does this reading department work in collaboration with building administrators as well as classroom teachers to monitor performance, and then what measures do we have of reading achievement, and where does that mean in terms of next steps for us as a school district? Because there's sort of that micro level of what am I, teacher A, in this classroom going to do for student B. But then there's also the step of looking back broadly as a district and saying, based on the trends in data, where do we continue with the decisions we've made and where do we need to continue to grow? So my hope is that by the end of this presentation, you get a sense of how we use assessment both of learning, but for learning as well, and as learning as a team, and how that relates to reading achievement specifically. So with that, Joey's going to take over. And let me just make sure this is working.
Okay. So before we take a look at the variety of data points that Mary was referencing, we thought it was important to first come to sort of a common understanding about the complexities of both teaching reading and learning to read as a reader. So if you take a look at this very common representation of reading, you've maybe seen this image before, or if not, you may see it again. It shows you how comprehension and word recognition are so closely wound together. And this is important for both an instructor of reading, but also for a reader themselves to understand, because as we teach even our youngest learners, reading is thinking. If you're not thinking while you're reading, you might as well put the book down. And that's something that we teach them from a very early age. Having said that, at the most primary level, we do begin with word recognition. And it becomes about learning to read.
and then weaving in that understanding. And again, at the primary level, comprehension instruction looks very much at the literal comprehension. So, do I know the name of the character? What is the setting? Can I retell the most basic events in the story in order? But as we progress as readers and we approach the upper elementary level, when we talk about word recognition, we're now talking about fluency and automaticity. How quickly can I recall those words? How fluently can I read them? Am I using expression? But also in comprehension, it becomes much more complex, because now we're talking about things like synthesizing and reading between the lines, what we call inferring. And as text becomes more complex, our expectation of higher order thinking becomes more rigorous as well. So as you'll see later on in some of our slides, you may see that represented a little bit in the data, and we'll explain that when we get there. But there's a jump from the primary level to upper elementary in terms of what our expectations are of readers, and also about how our instruction has to change. And then when we talk about how to approach readers in any school setting, we generally use a 3-tier system. And again, a tiered triangle, or sometimes we call it an SRBI triangle. It's also just a 3-tiered instructional model. We look at, in any population of students, that we have about 80 to 85% of our students falling in the tier 1 range, which is that bottom tier. And that's where all students should benefit from instruction. So tier 1 speaks to our core curriculum. And this is instruction that all students at any tier, including tier 2 and tier 3, have access to. So tier 1 is our basic instruction for all students. When we move into tier 2, we're looking at a little bit more targeted support for students. Those students may need some small group work. That may be differentiation that takes place in the classroom, or it may be some small group work outside of the classroom with more specialized, differentiated instruction. And then at that highest tier 3, which generally is around 5% of our population, this is the most specialized instruction. And generally we like that to be delivered by the most qualified, specialized staff members. So students who need the most intense, most individualized level of instruction would fall in that tier. And then what types of assessment are we using? So Mary talked about the various data points that we use. And yes, at the summative level, we generally talk about the smarter balanced assessment. That's the most obvious summative assessment that we're giving beginning in grades 3. But there are many formative and interim assessments that we give every day in every classroom throughout the year. In every grade level, really, but I'm speaking to K-5 right now. So if you look at formative assessments, these include anything, including writing records, which is a record of student reading while we listen in, looking at the types of errors they're making, why they might be making them, how we can teach into those. It may include anecdotal records, just something I noted about the habits of a student while he or she is working that I want to come back to and maybe pull into a small group or have a one-on-one meeting about. Conferring notes in a workshop model. A big part of our workshop session is conferring with students, and that means we sort of come up right next to them and listen in to their reading, talk to them about what they're reading, ask them some higher order questions. We may pull that child together with a partnership or even a small group and take some notes about the conference that we're having. So those conferring notes help inform our instruction or our next day's lesson or maybe our next minute's lesson, depending on where we're going with that student. And then when we talk about interim assessments, these might include things like pre- and post-unit assessments. So when we're approaching a new unit of study, we'll want to give a pre-assessment to figure out where students are at that point and where we need to go next, and then a post-assessment at the end of the unit to determine how well they mastered that material, which in some ways is summative, but it's also driving our instruction because as we move into our next unit of study, we want to use that information to drive our decision making. And then another example of an interim assessment is our IABs, interim assessment blocks. And those are specifically tied to the Smarter Balanced assessment. They're opportunities for students to take small sections of Smarter Balanced-like tasks. They are done digitally, so they're able to experience the Smarter Balanced platform, have some experience with how to navigate those tools, and read passages and respond in ways that are similar to what they'll be asked to do on the Smarter Balanced assessment. Just a few, there are many, many other examples, but I'm giving you just a few. And then looking at this as a cycle, again, this shows much of what you saw on the last screen, but just the idea that all assessments that we're giving every day, whether they're formative or interim, they're all part of a constant cycle, and they all feed into one another. And we have to also include in that assessment cycle student attitude and habits. Because oftentimes when we're pulling a small group together, it may not even be about their achievement at that point. It may be about their attitude towards learning or towards reading, or their habits. We may notice that their volume of reading is not significant enough, or perhaps their stamina, how long they're able to sustain their independent reading, needs work. And so those might fall in the attitudes or habits towards reading, but still require some differentiation and still require some small group work. And then lastly, we just wanted to give you a little snapshot of what those assessments might look like in action. You can see Mrs. Wilkie there. So sometimes an assessment looks like what you might have remembered an assessment looking like in school. Everybody is completing the assessment at the same time. They may have their pencil out, or in today's world, a Chromebook out, and they may all be completing a very similar assessment simultaneously. But more often than that, it looks like this. It is one-on-one or a small group. We are sitting next to a student, conferring with the student. It's more reciprocal in nature. We may be asking them to respond. We may be asking them to provide some information, and then also providing some immediate feedback to them. You see two different assessments here. On the right is a kindergartner, and they're looking at letter identification, and on the left, that's a running record where we take an actual record of how the student is reading, what they are saying, if they make an error, what they said instead of what was on the printed page, and what that error tells us about the types of mistakes the reader is making and why they're making them. And then we can directly teach into how to fix that up, essentially. Jess?
So based on all the data and based on all the assessments that we do give, ongoing assessments and year-long assessments, we created a universal screening sheet that we have here. This is a universal screening spreadsheet provided to all K-5 teachers. And during 3 times a year, 3 different assessment windows, fall, winter, and spring, teachers are giving many assessments like Joey said. So this is an example, and if you look at the left, there would be a column with student name. So it shows every student where they fall on their iReady assessment, which is a digital assessment, where they fall on the benchmark assessment system, which is a running record, where they fall on the PSI, which is the spelling inventory, how they can spell words, hear the word, and spell them correctly, or spell them how they hear them. High frequency words, which are words in isolation. We give kids many words that they are going to see in their primary text. So they're words that you're going to see in most common text. Here we want kids to be automatic as they read the words. So some they can sound out phonetically and some they cannot. If they cannot sound them out, like the word said, we still say to them, look at the first letter and said. What letter do you see? You see an S. S makes sound. Look at the last letter and so forth. High frequency words are really important correlation to their reading level. So again, one little tiny assessment, it's a quick assessment that we check 3 times a year to make sure students are progressing. The last is dictation. Again, they can hear and record the sound they hear by writing a sentence. So all these assessments are given 3 times a year, different by grade level. So this is a first grade class. Every grade level has different assessments. And what we do, after teachers input the data, we look at the spreadsheet and we code it based on the benchmark. So if it's yellow, these students are slightly below benchmark, which means they might need a little boost. And Joey was referred to tier 2 instruction. Those students may get tier 2 in the classroom, differentiated learning with their classroom teacher, or they might be pulled out in a small group to really hone in on the skills they need. The red is students who are significantly below grade level. So these students might need a little bit more. So we look at these students across the grade level, not just per class, but across the grade level and look at their need. They're pulled together in small groups and given the skills and strategies they need to improve. So looking here at level, reading level, and high frequency words all together, we would pull a small group and look at instruction on the need they most need. So if they work in a high frequency word, we'll focus with that with them. Again, this is 3 times a year, and the kids who are not coded, if they're no color at all, these are students who are at benchmark or above. These students might be pulled in a small group as well in the classroom for enrichment activities. Differentiated learning is going on all the time in the classroom, throughout the day, every subject area, as well as our intervention block. So a lot of assessments, but again, they all come together to move each student where they need to go. Another example is the kindergarten screen.
What are the different letters mean, like SV and DEA?
Okay, so that's the PSI. So the PSI is a primary spelling inventory, so it's different stages of spelling. So SV would be short vowels. So this student is having difficulties in short vowels. And like D is digraphs, and they're all different spelling stages. So when we work with spelling through our foundation program in grade 1, or spelling connections grade 2 to 5, we really hone in on what they need. So if they're falling short in that skill, the teacher can really pull a small group, a couple days a week, and really practice those skills for them and give them strategies.
When you think about a first grader, there's going to be, and this is true all the way through, but the reciprocity between the spelling and the reading is going to be very high, right? Because they can understand how those digraphs work together, what's a welded sound versus a blended sound. That's all going to play right into their reading skills. So you're looking, this is sort of a 360-degree view of a reader, all these different elements of what is a really complex task. And so it's very comprehensive to make sure that you're not missing a component that could ultimately show up as a deficiency later. And that they're going to continue to be able to decode words at increasing levels of complexity. So this would be, the expectations appropriate for a first grader, but it can be very predictive of future reading and writing success.
So by looking at kindergarten, just like Mary said, we're really looking in at the skills, like almost the sub-skills. So in kindergarten, it's all letter identification, letter sound. So here's a core assessment that's given monthly to each kindergartner. It takes a few minutes, one-on-one, where a teacher would, again, sit next to a child and listen to them list the letters. So they're reading letters, they're saying the letter sounds and the vowel sounds. So again, this is a really important skill for kids to master. It's the foundation of reading. Think about that rope visual as the beginning part of that rope. If they don't master these skills in kindergarten, it's going to be more difficult to read later on. So we really want kids to feel comfortable, be able to read letters, automatically and quickly, and also know their sounds and know that letters have sounds. So every kindergarten teacher does this once a month, and again, it's coded by students who are doing great and know other letters and sounds. Kids who do not, teachers can quickly pull them, know who they are, know what letters they need to work on, and practice those quickly with them. Kindergartners also get pulled out for tiered support, and these are groups that they can work with a para or a reading specialist on the skills they need, letter sound. And one more tool that we use, a lot of data collection. Again, and all these data sheets are done by the classroom teacher and reviewed at our IDTs at Memorial School and reviewed at team meetings at Center School. It's a great way for teachers to see not only their classroom, but their whole grade level and the needs of the students and how we can, as a whole team, work together to help our students. So this is for grades 2 to 5, and it's the monthly unit assessments, or not monthly, but unit assessments that correlate with our Readers Workshop. And here we have lots of W's and P's and M's, and just this is correlated to our standards. It's all standards-based, aligns directly with our curriculum and the state standards. So kids are working or progressing towards how are we going to get them to meet the standards or to excel at the standards is our ultimate goal. It's a short passage that students read, and then they complete 3 or 4 comprehension questions that take about a half hour or so, but give teachers so much information about what the child can do. Again, another quick way that we can assess students and get the most information and help them grow as learners. The last one is our interim assessment blocks. Joey had mentioned this, how it's related directly to SBAC and how this is little snapshots and little like tastings of the bigger summative assessment. In third grade, it's really nice to give kids a taste of it. They get comfortable with the platform and they, have their login cards, and it's a quick way to see what they know. We want to prepare them to their very best on the summative and not be surprised by anything. So in grades 3 to 5, we do the IABs instructional and independently. So we're going to show students, what the platform looks like. We might read a passage or two together and answer some questions. It's a great model to really have that student-teacher correspondence back and forth. Teachers are working with students and students are working with students. And gives us so much information as far as how students can do or maybe will do on a summative. So here's a snapshot, and it shows, 5 items on which students perform the best, and 5 items on which students perform the worst. So the classroom teacher, you have so much data in your hands, what can you focus on? You're not going to take this data and, go teach 10 lessons. You're going to look at the 5 areas or the 5 questions that you need the most help on and work with those students. The really nice thing about this platform, on the Smarter Balance platform, it's a portal, you can go to every single question and look at the question and student responses. So it's that infinite. You can just go in and really look at every single question, what student, how they answered it, and then talk to that student about, how they did.
Johnson, I can just add, that's really significant to the teachers because the spring summative assessment that the state puts so much emphasis on, teachers cannot see, they never get a chance, they see students' scores, but they can't go in and look at the actual task and student response, which they would report to as a source of frustration because they want to know, what did they say? How did my students do? So that's nice about these interim blocks. They can actually go in and really see that work, which is going to tell them a lot about the students' learning.
Exactly. So I went over a lot of what classroom teachers do, how they input their data, how we look at the data, code it. Now Mindy's going to go over a whole school, how we look at data, in a little different view.
So this is the bigger global view of school performance. And again, you'll see the triangles that we have here because that's the way we sort of like to look at our curriculum assessment and instruction to make sure we're looking at that alignment and also student performance. So this is Memorial School's data, grades 1 through 3 on the iReady assessment, which is a diagnostic assessment. So they take it digitally. This is a composite of students' phonological awareness, their phonics, their vocabulary, how they comprehend literary information and also informational text. This is an adaptive test. So this gives us a view of how is our whole school performing. This is an end of the year standard. So students are taking this at the beginning of the year and although it's adaptive, it is looking to see how well they perform on an end of grade level work. And then again, we take it in January, February, the middle of the year. And then we will get our end of the year data. So that's Memorial Schools. And you can see we kind of want our triangle to get bigger on the bottom and then smaller on the top. And then this is center school data, the same assessment, but for kids in 4th and 5th grade. And again, we're looking at that triangle data. And this is what we call an intervention screener. So we can also then click on this. Once we get this data, we can actually go into specific grade level data. So on a whole, when we meet with a group of teachers, we can talk about what we need to do instructionally as a grade level. We can also get individual classroom data. So each classroom also has a specific sort of profile, and then student-specific data on how each individual student did on phonological awareness, phonics, vocabulary, those kinds of things. And this way we can pull small groups, or we can look to teach particular lessons within the classroom. So this is amazing data. We spend hours on this, and classroom teachers, we're just really implementing the iReady for the last 2 years, and we're sort of getting really excited about how we can look at this information.
Then can you just go back to the last?
Sure.
I just want to mention this. For those of you who were at the board retreat last July, we looked at iReady end of year data. And there was a lot of success via iReady when we looked at that data. We were really pleased with the growth from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year to the end of the year. And so this is showing you the beginning of the year and the middle of the year because we give our end of year assessments in May, late May. And as Mindy said, we're seeing the trajectory or progress we would expect. We expect in the fall that we're going to see students needing to make growth because, say I'm a second grader. I've just arrived in second grade. I have not yet mastered the expectations of second grade. So we look at that beginning of the year data. It tells us, okay, some students are further along than others. What do they need, whether it's second grade or fifth grade? By middle of the year, we expect to see significant progress and growth amongst the larger student population, which you can see here. You know, our population at Tier 1 went from 38% to 51%, so that helps us to predict, and actually the assessment gives you that option to do some predictive figures for where we would expect this spring to be. So both of those figures would show we're on target for the expectations for the end of the year.
And then here's another view of our data. This is K-5 students reading on grade level with the iReady. This is the end of year data from last year. And you can see that there is a trend from grade 1 to 3, so we have nice incremental growth up into that third grade. And then there is a little bit of a dip in the fourth and fifth grade. And again, as Joey had mentioned and what we speak to is that this is where the comprehension and the higher level thinking, the inferencing skills. So it's not an excuse, but this is a problem of practice that we look at and how we can strengthen our students' comprehension skills in that area. And that's end of year data. And then this is the oral reading assessment, the benchmark assessment system. This is a one-to-one standardized assessment that teachers give to students when they do that oral reading. And then there is a comprehension check. And again, we see there is that close sort of consistency between what we're getting on the iReady and what we're getting on the FAP. So you can see it's the same kind of trend and the data looks very similar. So we feel really secure about how we're viewing the data that way.
And let's stay on this slide just for a second, because one of the things that I think we wanted to give you a really clean shot of end of year achievement and make it easy to see the percentages. But everything in our field focuses on growth. It's how, if you recall, the accountability index, the state looks at not just your straight achievement, but your growth in your achievement, as well as down to the individual student, even if you didn't make the anticipated growth, what percentage of your growth target did you achieve? So they're always looking to highlight that, and there's two reasons for that. One is, it's kind of, in some ways, I want you to see this, because then you can see like, oh, all right, everybody on third grade, that's a great percentage of kids to be on level in third grade. But each, you have different groups of students, and so really what we want to look at is where did those third graders start, and where did they land? And that is actually the data we looked at last summer in the board retreat, because if they started at 80% on level and we ended that really wouldn't be what we'd want to see. What I can tell you is we've analyzed that growth and we know each of these groups of students made significant growth, both on iReady and the benchmark assessment. So when you look at the differences in the grade levels, it's natural to say, well, second grade's doing better than, say, fifth. But that's not really how we look at student performance or how the state does. It looks at where were those learners when they began and where did they end up. That said, we also like to see a high level of students reading on grade level. And we look at the data this way as well because it helps us to see trends. And so we're going to look a little bit at next steps. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, just one more, because based on what Mary was saying, this is another way that we can look at the data. This is cohort data. Yes. So this is our present sixth grade followed through from 2013 to last year. And one thing to note is that in 2013, to 16 in that grade 1, 2, and 3, these are students that did receive workshop model instruction. So they have come through, knowing that our teachers were learning the workshop model, but you can see that there has been progression. And then in fourth grade, we do see that dip a little bit in 2016, but those are those same learners. Our teachers at that point at center school were being supported with unwrapping units at that time. They were just getting the materials, they were becoming familiar. And then our fifth grade, when they were in fifth grade, the teachers were in their second year of implementation, and you can see that there is an increase in student performance because that particular work around the standards and that higher level thinking is being addressed in the conferring and the workshop model.
one of the things that Mindy just said I want to revisit. So when you look at that 15-16 year, and it's going to be in a future slide, so maybe, is that we have a difference in implementation schedules at all of our buildings. So Memorial's been implementing Readers and Writers Workshop and the associated assessments that we're referring to that collect all of this data longer. So you can, what this data actually tells us is our choices have been successful at Memorial. We now have the data that really clearly illustrates that the implementation of the units and the associated assessment tools are working. In 16-17, as our friends in this cohort group arrived at Center School, as Mindy said, that's year 1 of implementation at Center School, both of the units, but also of some of the assessments. So, and I'll just, would you like me to? Yes, I'll take that. And just in giving you that global picture, because I'm always in awe of all teachers, but our elementary teachers, in particular in the last couple of years, we're also implementing a new math program and new science. So there's a lot going on there. So when we look at what have we been able to accomplish from 2015 to 2019 in terms of our literacy implementation, we now have full implementation of Readers and Writers Workshop K-5, and the years there you can see broken out as in terms of the first stage of that implementation was K-3 and then ultimately 4-5, so it grows with the kiddos. Then we've also increased our consistency in our expectation. So we now have consistent pacing guides, unit calendars, our bottom lines, and clear principles about literacy instruction that all teachers know these are guaranteed. I should be able to go into any classroom and see these elements of a literacy classroom. And so those are something that we design, implement, share with the teachers, live, and then annually update or adjust as necessary. I think we've gotten them to a place that we're pretty pleased with. I don't expect too many more significant changes. The shift in grade 5 to the partnership model we see as having, if we go back here to this data, that 5th grade uptick we believe is associated with that. iReady was something that we really launched in Memorial on a small basis, really piloting and working with a small percentage of the students, but now we have full implementation K-8, which is important. We now have a consistent tool to measure student success, and we have that historical data for our students over time. We shifted the developmental reading assessment, or the DRA, to the benchmark assessment system, or the BAS. Both are going to be tools that help us to authentically measure students' reading skills, but we really believe that the benchmark assessment system is sort of the gold standard, the best tool for monitoring how students are reading and for our teachers to, it helps to develop their expertise in terms of reading instruction. And so that was something we had to purchase, roll out, and train all of our teachers on, as we did last year. We continue to monitor our building schedules so that teachers have regular access to each other to discuss this instruction, as well as to access small groups of students. And we have continued areas for growth and things that we continue to want to work on. So as we shore up our processes at Memorial, we continue to grow our practices at Center, and we'll continue that growth into the middle school. And one of the things that we know is that teachers learn best from each other and with strong coaches, and we've been very fortunate to have Mindy, Jess, and Joey's skills at Memorial and Center, and it's why we really felt it was critical to add that reading specialist position to middle. They've really been able to refine the teacher's skills and develop their sophistication, because for a while we were in transition in 2015 through 2018, I would say, of how are we going to do this, what exactly are we teaching, and now they're no longer in that phase. The teachers aren't, what am I doing, what's the tool, what's the assessment, it's how am I going to do this well. And that's where we want to be, because teachers should be freed up from focusing on what's happening, what's the curriculum, to how do I do this with fidelity and to make sure that my students have the best possible outcomes. And I would say Memorial is in that place and Center is comfortably approaching, and we're on our way over to middle. We continue to embed professional learning for our teachers. Memorial School, for example, we have a group of teachers giving their own time, staying till 4:30, 5 o'clock to engage in a webinar with an expert, tomorrow, come see, Jen Sarabello, an expert in reading instruction, book clubs, instructional coaching. I'd like to have more of the time of literacy specialists in classrooms side by side with teachers. They do a lot of direct service delivery in addition to all of that data analysis and programmatic planning. They also are the ones who deliver a lot of that Tier 3 reading instruction. Our para-professional team is a huge part of our instructional process. They're invaluable to us as teachers, and they need the same level of training ultimately that our teachers do, and we're just starting that process with them. And we continue to look for opportunities for, as I said, those teacher schedules are always something we're working on to make sure that the limited time they have away from their students can be purposefully directed towards growing their skills and working collaboratively to solve common problems. Any questions? So we will look at the year-end data at the board retreat again this summer. So this gives you a little tutorial on how we think about readers, how much data we do look at, because it is ultimately a highly complex task. We do follow, I should also mention, the state trend in that shift we see in 4th and 5th grade. One of the things you want to think about is, and I mentioned this at the Accountability Index presentation, that the state really starts closely monitoring student learning in 3rd grade. And I mentioned to you when I talked about the Accountability Index that we're very excited about Memorial's success because 3rd grade performance is highly predictive of future academic success. So we want that 3rd grade to be really, and all of our students to be exiting 3rd grade in optimal academic placement. We know that in 4th and 5th grade, reading becomes challenging in a different way. It's sort of shifting from reading to learn, from learning to read to reading to learn. I'm no longer just trying to figure out how to read. I'm now reading in order to access new learning, to access content. And so I'm not just practicing the skills of reading, I'm doing that while also learning about the past, about science, about complex emotions that are new to me as a growing individual in literature. So the comprehension expectations, if we go back to that reading rope slide that Joey started with, there's a real shift in the cognitive load into comprehension. Do I understand this? Can I make meaning? Can I connect this with learning I've already accessed? And that's really challenging for students. And so that's a statewide trend, and one that we continue, as I said, through our planning and programmatic implementation to tackle.
So where is middle school again? How comfortable are the teachers?
So 2 years ago we started just in 6th grade with Readers Workshop, very introductory. This year we got into the workshop model 6-8. So 6th grade did Readers and Writers. Because the students they were receiving had come up through Readers and Writers Workshop. 7th and 8th grade was doing Writing Workshop. Next year we go full implementation to Readers and Writers at the middle school. And that's part of, throughout the last year and a half of starting to engage the literacy team at the middle school, the English teachers with Workshop. We had to look at how we're using time, how we're using staff, which is why we made the decision this year to move away from the 8-teacher department to the 4-teacher department, because we can really focus all of our supports on those 4 teachers. And the curricular units that we're purchasing are meant for a single block of time, and I would say that's typical in a district like ours. So it allows us to give longer instructional minutes to all content areas at the middle level. Our math and science teachers need that time too, and we can focus sort of the best practices in those literacy classrooms. We had external coaching brought in this year to support their work with Readers and Writers Workshop, but really maybe once a month for a grade level, they have someone they can talk to. We have a whole intervention process there where we're looking at that tiered data and looking to implement supports for students at various levels, but we don't have a literacy specialist on site to do that coding and analysis that Jess walked you through a few minutes ago. So we've been building those practices. I really have to give a lot of credit to the middle school teachers, the paras in the reading department, Mr. Lehman for overseeing that process, Mrs. Wilkie for assisting direct support in the reading center, Mr. Sullivan for loaning that's spoken to us at times. So there's been a really shared process. Mrs. Bauer has gone over to do some direct coaching, but having a literacy specialist housed there to really look at the data, to really have a full team. Mindy can call Jess and Joey and say, what's the history on this reader? What was the service? I've got this data on the data sheet or in iReady, but what's your take on what you saw and experienced and how the teachers responded? The middle school needs somebody who can use the expertise in the district and make sure we're not missing anything. We don't want anyone to fall through the cracks. we need to continue that support. The standards would tell you that foundational skills need to be strongly in place by the end of 5th grade, but we know, not just in East Hampton, but learners across the state still need reinforcement of those skills in middle school. And so that's what we're looking to continue to build. Thank you very much, and I give a lot of credit to these ladies. Thank you. The next presentation is a continuation. You'll recall, I remember if it was the end of March, I believe it was our last board meeting in March. We heard a presentation from Memorial School and Center School about our K-5 social emotional learning. So kind of shifting gears, because we think of our learners as whole people, and they have a lot of different kinds of needs. So that's one lens as readers. But social emotional learning is an area that we continue to grow as a district, and so you heard from our Memorial team, but also some of our related services staff who cross buildings into centers, so Jenny Quinn and Sue Englehart's physical therapist and social worker respectively, who talked about Second Step. And Second Step is our social emotional curriculum K-5. And they were enthused to share that with you and very positive about how that sets up a system to really teach our students about their own emotional life and well-being and how to talk about that as a whole class. Additionally, they talked about zones of regulation, which is common language to support students' ability to self-regulate. How am I feeling right now, and how can I talk to other people about that? If you really stop and think about that in your own life, I'm sure you can think about both students, children, family, friends, other adults who, zones of regulation, we used to joke, we should all use that in our day-to-day lives. It's really a great support. But social emotional learning continues. We are always works in progress as individuals. We don't stop needing to talk about those things in 5th grade. And so we continue our social emotional learning well into our middle and high school programming. Joanna was kind enough to join us at our last meeting to talk about our developmental guidance curriculum, which is sort of a continuation of that Second Step-like work. We're really proud of the work that both Joanna and Erin Manis have done to grow this brand new program at our middle school, to make sure that every 6th grader, as we use the language from our last presentation, a Tier 1 support and service to them when they make this major transition from elementary to secondary, has a class dedicated to how am I managing this? How am I managing the expectations on me, my responsibilities, my time, my feelings? But the middle school doesn't stop there. They also have an advisory program that all students participate in, and Jason and Joanna are here tonight to talk about that, and then we're going to hear as well from the high school about the advisory program. So this gives you sort of the second step, if I can, of our social emotional learning. So thank you so much.
And if I could interject a plug right now, an invitation to all board members for May 24th, 9 a.m. We'll be having our annual Memorial Day observation. So please, I'd like to welcome you to attend while I'm thinking of it. Thank you for having us tonight. I wanted to go back to the profile of the East Hampton graduate and just highlight especially resilience and perspectives. And I did that on purpose because that really ties to our work with advisory. A very good friend and role model of mine and superintendent here twice, Mark Winsler, will tell you over and over and over again, it's all about relationships. And that's pretty much advisory in a nutshell. It's about building those relationships, and how do we do that so that kids have an opportunity to have somebody in the building, if it's just one person, somebody to talk to when they're going through struggles. As we all know, middle school can be a very difficult time. Both physical growth and social emotional growth are something that kids need somebody that they can go to, confide in, and talk to. Joanna was kind enough tonight to come after her track practice. So thank you very much, Joanna.
I usually don't look like this. Usually at this time I'm in my pajamas.
You threw him off with the softball sweatshirt. That's actually
I coach multiple games in town and stuff. So the purpose, like Mr. Lehman said, is to have an opportunity for our students to develop relationships with the staff members, and not just have like that teacher-student relationship, kind of have that person-to-person relationship. And I thought this was really important because it's really funny when you see a staff member outside of the school building. And I remember seeing my principal stop and shop with his little child wearing jeans, and I was just like, whoa, this dude wears jeans, you know, like he's more than just a principal. So we're more than just teachers, and just to develop that relationship for the kids we think is really important. And again, like Mr. Lehman said, we want somebody in that school that could be that go-to person for each student, whether it's something that's happening at home or with friends, you know, something happening here at school. As long as they have a tie to an adult, we feel that's a safe net for that person to go to. So we wanted to continue giving the support to the development of all our young students. Okay, I know how to use this now. So what we do at the beginning of the year, we have basically a set committee, but we always invite new staff members to join the advisory committee. And we meet over the summer and we go over some of the topics that we want to review or hit on with our character education. And then each month we make sure that one of the topics is kind of handled by a staff member, so they have to prepare a lesson and then implement it on a such day. So we started over the summer getting it all organized. We do it on a monthly basis, and it's during our flex period, typically on Fridays, and it's about a 30 to 32 minute period of time. And it happens right within, our advisories are our homerooms, but there are 2 staff members assigned to each homeroom this year. So like I have my partner is Christina Amaral. We decide to keep our kids together and run our advisory together. Some may take their half of kids and then I think together we're like around 20, 22 kids, but some people like to have a smaller, intimate setting and have their 10 kids in another room, and then they can just continue developing that relationship on a more intimate level. So, you changed this on me, huh?
You want me to jump in? Because
No.
I'm in for a reason.
Go ahead.
So, advisory work at EHMS, there's 2 main driving forces, as well as the profile of the East Hampton graduate. PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention Support, is a system that we've been using in the school for 12 years?
Yeah, a long time.
12 years. And our Grading Reform Success Skills Committee has been piloting this year, kind of looking at some grading reform tactics. And the words that they're using for their success skills are preparedness, active learning, conduct, and pride. And if you look at these words kind of side by side, you see there's a lot of connections to the 2. If you're respecting your classroom, you're probably coming in prepared. Responsibility, it's your responsibility to have active learning. Compassion and conduct, pride and obviously pride. These all go together and they kind of, they align well. That's why I wanted that to look that way.
Okay. So we start each advisory with what we call community time, and that's when we kind of just have some downtime with the kids. We talk about how their week's been going, what's been new, what family stuff has been going on, and just to kind of get to know them outside of the academic arena. And then we share our stuff with them, and I think that's even more important than the kids sharing with us, because we talk about our children and our families and vacations that we did, and some maybe things that drive us crazy, like sometimes we'll talk about our kids and what they do and why we pull our hair out and stuff like that. But it's nice for them to see the human side of us and not just the staff member side of us. So we start always with a 5-10 minute breakout session of community time. We just kind of laugh with the kids, and they'll ask us questions, we'll ask them questions. So it's just nice to just kind of have some downtime and some fun with the kids, and that helps support the development and that relationship development between us and the kids. So our activities and our lessons, they include videos, they include music, we have them do some artistic designing so they can use their artistic abilities. We go into breaking into small group sessions, large group sessions. So we do a variety, we use a variety of skills within it, so it's not just always based on one, like one skill, because then we're trying to hit the interest of all the students of what they're good in. Even though we each have a lesson and we share it out, and that each team goes over it within a team meeting to make sure that they understand it, we always have the liberty to tell the teachers, you guys know your advisory groups. This is the gist of it, this is the goal of it, but if there's any tweaks you wanna make, go ahead and make them. Kind of like with reading, like you know your students, you know how to get to them, you know the message we want to send to them, go ahead and make that change that you see fit. And I do that. Sometimes I'll write my own lesson plan and I'll just tweak it just because I know how I want to run it with the kids that I know. You know, and maybe if I had a different set of kids, I might change it again in a different way. But we have that flexibility with the teachers, that they have the gist of the program, but they have that flexibility to make it work for their kids. Did I hit it?
Yep, you're good now.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Any questions?
So this goes a lot with our character education, what we do in our DG class, with our PBIS program. That's been my big push. I did my thesis when I was in my master's program, so this is something that, you know, Erin and I are really passionate about, making sure that all the kids are not just developing academically, but also social and emotionally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think
You can clap.
one of the things to always keep in mind when you hear about sort of second step lessons, say at the elementary level, students have that built-in sense of community in place because they have, you know, a classroom that grounds them, that's their home base. And when you get to middle, although students are still part of a team, and that's the model that's part of the middle school philosophy, is that students start to operate in teams, which are larger. It's really great to have that advisory model to help give an anchor of that staff member who's someone you might go to with a question or concern, like you might have with your classroom teacher at the elementary level. So that's another component of the sort of bridge that goes on between elementary to middle. And then as you know, as students move over to the high school, they really are at times still placed by grade level in terms of classes, but they have a lot more fluidity in their scheduling and in their programming, and they get to have a lot more independence and choice. But we continue to use advisory as a way to support their growth and development and to connect them to a staff member. So I'd like to introduce Kristen Dean, Nikki Galvez, and Ms. Rizzuto, who are going to talk a little bit about advisory at the high school.
Good evening, everyone. This is where my mojo is with the bell, so I'm going to this side. So we're going to give a little bit of some background, and we're using a little bit of a different medium here, as you can kind of see. So, but between the three of us, we'll just kind of give this a nice little setup for you. So this year's advisory program was a redesign of the past structure. And it was spearheaded by Mrs. Galvez and Mrs. Dean, which I'm eternally grateful for. They did an amazing job. It also served as a support structure to one of the high school's building initiatives, which revolved around student and development of strong connections and relationships to the high school, some of the similar themes that we heard from our middle school colleagues. And along with that comes, supplementing the coursework that students are involved in by being involved in a club or a sport or the performing arts, but it also involves having strong relationships with their teachers. And in particular, their advisory teacher, who wears multiple hats. Advisory teacher is not only their advisory teacher, but it is their homeroom teacher and their X-Block teacher. It's the same person who our students see 4 times a week over the course of their 4-year high school career. So this is a nice foundational spot in order to develop those strong relationships to the school.
This year, as we sat down to develop the advisory program, we really took into consideration student and staff feedback. We sent out a survey to the staff at the end of last school year and sent out a survey to students pretty much about every month to get feedback, to get their ideas, to tell us how we could make it better. And we really listened to what the kids and the staff said and tried to incorporate that so that our program would reflect what the kids thought would be useful to them.
From the feedback that we received, we built our goals for the program around what teachers said, what was important to them, what the purpose of advisory was. So the main purpose, like the middle school, we echo that, and so did the teachers, was to build relationships and networks with students to adults in the building. So it could be their advisory teacher, but also
other adults that they don't see on an everyday basis. They might just kind of see in the hallway, and they might connect with them in one way or another. And also to build connections amongst themselves, so students to students, because we tend to live our lives kind of in silos sometimes, especially in schools as you move from one class to the next. And the way that when we could, we designed the advisories so that students would get mixed up. They would meet new friends, and they would be led by a different staff member, a different teacher. We purposely had them sign up for activities, not saying what teacher was going to lead it or where it was going to be led, so that it was purely, they purely picked those advisory sessions on their interests alone, and then they got to meet other staff and other students that shared in their interests. Another goal was to foster a sense of belonging, that every single one of the students belonged, and like the reading presentation said before, that no one fell through the cracks, that we caught everybody somehow in one way or another. And then another main goal was just to teach life skills, to be life ready, because they need that as well. So those were some main goals that you'll hear in this presentation. And so the presentation goes through that, and then it goes through each month what we did, and then it ends with some student testimonials.
favorite advisory was the Are You Ready life skills. I like this because it was fun and I thought it prepared me for doing actual interviews in real life.
My favorite advisory was the Step Over the Line one because it kind of gave everybody an opportunity to see other people that are experiencing the same thing that they are and learn something new about their friends.
My favorite advisory was the Escape the Room advisory. It promoted team building throughout the Xbox.
So my favorite advisory was the Are You Ready advisory, and I liked it because it let students choose from a wide range of activities. I actually did sewing with Senora Del Vope, and I learned how to hem pants.
My favorite part of the advisory was being part of the advisory making group and planning our first ever school advisory. It was really fun when we did it.
Our favorite advisory was the life skills advisory where we learned how to stay safe with Mr. Luke. We hope we can do this again in the future because it was very beneficial and there's a lot of other activities that we get to try.
My favorite advisory was nature walk with Abe because I like going outside and we never get to go outside during school anymore. Thanks.
Our favorite advisory was the Are You Ready advisory. Personally, I did Dress to Impress and I learned how to dress for business occasions.
I was recruiting myself as a college athlete, and the teachers who helped me really opened my eyes to how you're putting yourself out there in a positive way.
I did building a resume, and I learned a lot about how to put all of my accomplishments and achievements into one document for future jobs. Thanks.
So my favorite advisory was probably the Chris Herron one because it inspired me to be a better person who I am.
I can stand by that too. For me, it was more so the advisories where we could go to different rooms, meet different teachers that you wouldn't really expect to be teaching certain skills or different activities. And it was more of a school-based community kind of activity for us. At least we got to meet other students, meet other teachers, and kind of almost bond over different things while learning things that were new. And it's just really interesting. The fact that we got to choose our own, it was something that was really interesting. We all really did enjoy it.
What was the one coming up for May? So this month we're doing a team building activity, and we were going to do Project Courage for May, which is an outside organization that brings in a lot of different topics that students can sign up for, different workshops. But we actually, when I made the presentation, we had planned it for May, but it's actually going to be in September, so we have to rethink what we're going to do in May. So.
Questions?
Sounds like the kids are, loving it, basically. Chance to do different things.
There's a wide variety for them to choose from. So, I mean, just like the staff, the people that offer them have a wide variety of interests. So we get to do what we like and they get to sign up for what they like. So
Do the teachers see difference in the kids as far as
engagement,
the culture and the relationships, and do they each feel that they've gotten close to kids and have a more meaningful relationship with a group of kids?
I feel like you see students in a different light, and you can kind of, I did a cross-circuit training with the art teacher, and we set up different stations in her room when we did the activities one, and we got a whole mix of students in there, and they were having fun. We were, encouraging them, and I think you stopped by for that one a little bit, right, Paul? And it's a fun environment. It's something where they're being there because they want to be there, and you do connect. I didn't know many of the students, many of them as students, so that they didn't have any preconceived notions, and I feel that, yes, it's good, and now when those students see me in the hall, they know me in that light, and it's nice.
Yeah, I actually did a dumpling making workshop for the teacher-led one, and the kids you know, a lot of the kids that signed up, I hadn't known them because I don't have them as students. So it was really fun to get to interact with students that you don't have in class. And they seem to just really enjoy it because generally the kids really like the fact that they can sign up for what they are interested in. So they want to be in your workshop. And it's just a lot of fun. And I think that a lot of them were just, you know, when they were going back to class, you could feel a lot of positive energy in the hall. And they were all really in a great mood. They just got to have a little bit of a break from the day. I feel like they really enjoyed it. Yeah. Great.
So before we officially close, there are a handful of folks, a variety of different roles that also help support this, and it also has students involved. But I just want to publicly commend Mrs. Dean and Mrs. Galvez for doing an amazing job here at the high school with the advisory program. So.
Sorry to wake you up.
They came on rather suddenly.
Thank you, staff, for presentations. We appreciate that. Principals, Mary. Okay, let's see. Program presentations, unfinished business, new business, policies.
We have 3 policies tonight, and Lois and Nancy will answer any questions that you have. But we are asking you to waive the second read. All of these policies are currently in practice, so they are policies to catch up with our practice. So if we could get them approved. You saw the attendance one is just an update on tardies. It's a policy that you've approved in the past. You saw the presentation on the graduation requirements a couple months ago from Frank. And then this is just updating the class rank policy to match practice.
Lois or Nancy, have anything to add, or any discussion that was happening, or no? Any questions, anybody? Mark? I think rewording the class rank was had to be a challenge.
Yes, it was. And so the final version I did give you, if you just wanted to skip over everything that was there.
Right.
The final version is on the second page, so it just makes it a little bit easier to read.
Are we only ranking the top 10 students?
Frank, do you want to give an explanation of that?
So, sure. Beginning with the class of 2019, the class rank was locked at the end of the third quarter, whereas compared to previously it had been locked halfway through senior year. A variety of different reasons to that, including the fact that there was still a good chunk of the senior year to kind of reflect their performance, keep students engaged in the class, so that's where the intent were locked. And from there, those students will be recognized in a similar manner as they have been, and yeah, so that was the major shift to the class rank.
Okay. But are we just ranking 1 through 10? Like kids, the rest of the kids don't know their rank?
No, the rest, as it is, that is still underneath old practice. So student number 16 could know that he or she is 16 in the class. But that's part of an ongoing conversation with staff. So
do we stop at a certain point?
Does not.
Does not. Okay. And we started this conversation 15 years ago.
Well, we're going to hope to
continue
it because it's funny, you just kind of created a bridge for something that I hope to share in the fall. But a lot of schools have been having those conversations for 15 years. There's been a lot of changes. And I'll be happy to share that with the board come this fall.
Yeah, whatever is being discussed. Okay. All right, so we need a motion to, I guess we can do them all 3 at the same time, to, I guess, first of all, make a motion to only do a first read, and then we'll make a motion to approve. Is that the way it should go?
You can make a motion to waive the second read.
Waive the second read.
That's
Sorry, with the termination, okay, the
easier.
terminology, yeah. Okay. Okay, second? Nancy, second? Okay. All in favor of waiving the second read on these three policies? Aye. Okay. Anybody opposed? No. Okay, so now I need a motion to approve policy 5113, attendance, excuses, dismissal, policy 6146, graduation requirements, and policy 6146.11, class rank.
So moved.
Second? Nancy, second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Any opposed? No? All right. Motion passes. Accepting those, or passing those three policies.
Thank you.
So, do you want to explain the policy that we had sitting at our desk, or
Not at this time.
just to?
That's an invitation for you to attend May 13th policy subcommittee, because policy subcommittee has not reviewed this policy yet.
Okay. So this is open to any board member? to come?
As an audience, it'll still be a
The policy committee.
policy
Okay.
subcommittee meeting
Okay.
prior to the board meeting. But obviously, you're welcome to sit in the audience and just get a sense.
Okay. All right. So everybody read this over for May 13th. Any future business?
Just a note, fresh calendar at your places tonight. Just a reminder that we do have a meeting next Monday night. And that will be in here starting at 6 p.m.
How many are going to be able to make that meeting?
I should be here.
Yeah, 1, 2, Lois, yes, Amanda, yes? Yes, okay, because I might be late, and if I'm going to be late, I may not, like you
You
said.
might be
may not-
disqualified
yeah,
from
so
attending, yes.
I have to learn, we're doing stuff with Mara for interviews, so depending on when I can get back up here. So but I wanted to make sure that we'd have enough people, so, okay, good. Thank you, don't forget about that. Personnel actions, nothing? Audience of citizens, anybody want to make a comment? Nope, okay. Calendar we talked about, so motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mark first. Lois second? Lois seconds. Motion carried? Aye. We're done.
I did, finally. It's fine now. It's just a whole